Sarah Williams was tired. Her feet hurt from standing for 12 hours straight at the hospital. She had been working as a nurse for 8 years, and night shifts always made her feel drained. But the money was good, and she needed every dollar to take care of her 2 kids. She walked slowly to her car in the hospital parking lot. The cold night air hit her face as she opened the car door. Sarah threw her bag in the back seat and sat down behind the wheel. She looked at the clock on her dashboard. It was 11:15 at night. Her kids would be asleep by the time she got home. Sarah started her car and pulled out of the parking lot. The streets were mostly empty. Only a few cars passed by as she drove through the quiet neighborhood. She lived about 20 minutes away from the hospital. This drive home was usually peaceful. It gave her time to think about her day and relax before going to bed. She thought about her son Marcus, who was 17 years old. He was a good kid, but she worried about him all the time. Living in their neighborhood meant dealing with police often. Sarah had taught Marcus what to do if he ever got stopped by cops. Keep your hands where they can see them. Don't make sudden moves. Be polite and respectful. Say, yes sir, and no sir. Do whatever they tell you to do. Her daughter Emma was only 12. She was still innocent and didn't understand why her mom worried so much about these things. Sarah hoped she could keep Emma safe and innocent for as long as possible. As Sarah drove down Maple Street, she noticed something was wrong with her car. The steering wheel felt a little loose. She made a mental note to take it to the mechanic tomorrow. Money was tight, but car repairs couldn't wait. She needed her car to get to work. Sarah was thinking about her grocery list when she saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Her heart started beating faster. She looked at her speedometer. She wasn't speeding. She tried to think if she had done anything wrong. Maybe she didn't come to a complete stop at that last stop sign. Or maybe her registration was expired. She couldn't remember when she last renewed it. She pulled over to the side of the road and put her car in park. Sarah took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. She had been stopped before, and it was always scary, but she knew what to do. She had practiced this routine many times in her head. Sarah turned off the radio and rolled down her window. She placed both hands on the steering wheel where the officers could see them. She waited. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. 2 police officers got out of their patrol car. She could see them in her side mirror. One was older and seemed calm. The other looked younger and was walking fast toward her car. The younger officer had his hand near his gun belt. The older officer reached her window first. He was a Hispanic man with graying hair. His name tag said Martinez. He looked like he had been doing this job for a long time. His face was serious, but not angry. He bent down to look at Sarah through her window. "Good evening, ma'am," Officer Martinez said. His voice was calm and professional. "Do you know why I stopped you tonight?" Sarah kept her hands on the steering wheel. "No, sir, I don't," she said quietly. She tried to keep her voice steady, but she could hear it shaking a little. "Your left taillight is out," Martinez explained. "I need to see your driver's license, registration, and insurance card." Sarah nodded. "Yes, sir. My license is in my purse on the passenger seat. My registration and insurance are in the glove compartment." This was the part that always made her nervous. She had to move her hands to get her documents. Any sudden movement could be seen as threatening. She had heard too many stories about people getting shot during traffic stops because officers thought they were reaching for a weapon. The younger officer had moved to the passenger side of her car. Sarah could see him through her passenger window. His name tag said Johnson. He looked nervous and kept looking around. His hand was still near his gun. "I'm going to reach for my purse now," Sarah said slowly to Officer Martinez. "It's right here on the passenger seat." Martinez nodded. "Go ahead, nice and slow." Sarah carefully moved her right hand toward her purse. She kept her movements slow and visible. She found her wallet and pulled out her driver's license. She handed it to Martinez through the window. "Now need to get my registration and insurance." From the glove compartment, Sarah said. This made her even more nervous. The glove compartment was where she kept her gun. She had a legal permit to carry it. She always kept it locked in a small gun safe inside the glove compartment when she was driving. It was completely legal. but she knew that mentioning a gun during a traffic stop could make things very dangerous very quickly. Officer Johnson moved closer to the passenger window. He was looking inside her car with a flashlight. Sarah could see that he was young, in his 20s. He looked tense and jumpy. His eyes kept moving around, and he seemed on edge. "I have a legal firearm in the glove compartment," Sarah said to Martinez. "It's locked in a gun safe. I have a permit for it. I just want you to know before I open the glove compartment to get my registration." This was the right thing to do. She had taken a gun safety class that taught her to always inform police officers about her weapon during traffic stops. It was supposed to make everyone safer, but Officer Johnson's reaction was not what she expected. When he heard the word gun, his whole body tensed up. He immediately put his hand on his weapon and took a step back from the car. "She's got a gun," Johnson shouted to his partner. Martinez looked confused. "She said she has a permit," he called back to Johnson. "She's being cooperative." But Johnson wasn't listening. His training had taught him that any mention of a weapon was a potential threat. He had only been on the job for 8 months, and he was still learning how to handle these situations. The stress of the job was getting to him. There had been several violent incidents in the area recently, and all the officers were on high alert. Sarah could see that the situation was changing quickly. The calm traffic stop was becoming something else. She kept her hands on the steering wheel and tried to stay perfectly still. "Sir, I have a legal permit," she said to Martinez. "The gun is locked up. I'm not reaching for it. I just need to get my registration papers." Martinez nodded and seemed to understand. He was experienced and had dealt with legal gun owners before, but his young partner was clearly not comfortable with the situation. "Johnson, calm down," Martinez called out. "She's cooperating. She told us about the weapon. That's what law-abiding citizens do." But Johnson was not calming down. His fear was taking over his training. He kept his hand on his gun and stayed back from the car. His breathing was fast, and sweat was forming on his forehead despite the cool night air. Sarah realized that something was going very wrong. What should have been a simple traffic stop was turning into something dangerous. She could see the fear in the young officer's eyes. She had seen that look before, and it never ended well. She kept her hands perfectly still on the steering wheel and waited to see what would happen next. Her peaceful drive home had become the beginning of the worst night of her life. Officer Johnson could not stop thinking about what had happened 3 weeks ago. Another officer had been shot during a traffic stop just 2 miles away. The suspect had pretended to reach for his registration, but pulled out a gun instead. Johnson had seen the video during training. It played over and over in his mind every time he approached a car. Now, his hands were shaking slightly as he stood by Sarah's passenger window. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every movement seemed dangerous. The word gun kept echoing in his head. She had said she had a gun. Even if she had a permit, people with permits could still be dangerous. His training instructor had told him that many times. Sarah could see that Officer Johnson was scared. She had worked with scared people at the hospital. Fear made people do unpredictable things. She tried to speak in the calmest voice possible. "Officer, I'm going to stay perfectly still," Sarah said. "I won't reach for anything unless you tell me to. My hands will stay right here on the steering wheel." Martinez appreciated that Sarah was trying to keep everyone calm. He had been doing this job for 10 years. He had stopped hundreds of cars. Most people were just regular citizens trying to get home. He could usually tell the difference between someone who was dangerous and someone who was just nervous. "Ma'am, I'm going to reach into your car and get your registration myself," Martinez said. "That way, everyone stays safe. Is that okay with you?" Sarah nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, that's fine." The registration is in a folder in the glove compartment. The gun safe is a small black box also in there. The registration folder is separate from the gun safe. This seemed like a good solution. Martinez would get the documents himself. Sarah wouldn't have to move. Johnson could see everything that was happening. Everyone would stay safe. But Johnson was not thinking clearly anymore. His fear was growing stronger every second. He had heard too many stories about officers getting shot. He had seen too many training videos about traffic stops going wrong. His breathing was getting faster and his heart was pounding. "Martinez, don't reach in there," Johnson called out. "What if it's a trap? What if she's lying about the permit?" Martinez stopped and looked at his partner. Johnson's face was pale and sweaty. His hand was gripping his gun handle tightly. Martinez realized that his young partner was having a panic reaction. This was dangerous for everyone. "Johnson, take a deep breath," Martinez said calmly. "The lady is cooperating. She told us about her weapon. She's keeping her hands visible. This is how legal gun owners are supposed to act." But Johnson was not listening to reason anymore. Fear had taken over his mind. He kept imagining Sarah suddenly pulling out a gun and shooting them both. He kept seeing the training video of the officer who got shot. In his mind, every person in every car was a potential killer. Sarah could see that the young officer was losing control. She had seen this kind of panic before. Sometimes patients at the hospital would panic when they were scared or in pain. The key was to stay calm and not make any sudden movements that might make them more afraid. "Officers, I have 2 children at home," Sarah said quietly. "I just want to go home to them. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm just trying to cooperate with you." This was exactly the wrong thing to say to Johnson in his current state of mind. Instead of making him feel better, it made him more suspicious. Why was she talking about her children? Was she trying to distract them? Was she trying to make them feel sorry for her so she could catch them off guard? Johnson's training had taught him that criminals often tried to manipulate officers by talking about their families. They would try to seem innocent and harmless right before they attacked. At least, that's what Johnson was thinking in his panic state. "She's trying to distract us," Johnson called out to Martinez. "Don't listen to her. Just get this over with quickly." Martinez was getting worried about his partner. Johnson was clearly not handling the situation well. The best thing to do would be to finish this traffic stop as quickly as possible and get Johnson back to the station where he could calm down. "Ma'am, I'm going to reach in and get your registration now," Martinez said. "Please keep your hands exactly where they are." Sarah nodded and gripped the steering wheel tighter. She watched in her rearview mirror as Martinez walked around to the passenger side of her car. Johnson moved back to give him room, but he kept his hand on his gun. Martinez opened the passenger door slowly. The dome light came on, making everything inside the car visible. He could see Sarah's purse on the seat. He could see some papers and a coffee cup. Everything looked normal. He reached toward the glove compartment and pressed the button to open it. Inside, he could see a small folder with papers in it. Next to it was a small black metal box with the combination lock, just like Sarah had said. But when the glove compartment opened, Johnson saw something that made his panic even worse. The metal gun safe was bigger than he had expected, and there were some other items in the glove compartment that he couldn't see clearly in the dim light. "There's a lot of stuff in there," Johnson called out. "I can't see everything. This doesn't feel right." Martinez looked at the glove compartment. It was perfectly normal. Registration papers, insurance cards, some pens, a small flashlight, and the locked gun safe. "Nothing unusual or threatening. It's fine, Johnson," Martinez said. Everything is exactly where she said it would be. But Johnson was beyond rational thinking now. His imagination was creating threats that didn't exist. Every shadow looked like a weapon. Every normal object looked suspicious. His fear was making him see danger everywhere. Sarah was trying her best to stay calm, but she was getting scared too. She could see that Officer Johnson was not acting normally. His behavior was becoming more erratic and unpredictable. She had heard stories about police officers who shot people because they were afraid, even when there was no real threat. "Please, officers," Sarah said. "I just want to cooperate and go home. I'm not trying to cause any trouble." Martinez found the registration papers and pulled them out of the glove compartment. He closed it and walked back around to Sarah's window. He compared the name on the registration to the name on her driver's license. Everything matched perfectly. "Everything checks out," Martinez told Johnson. "Her registration is current. Her license is valid. We can give her a warning about the taillight and let her go." But Johnson was still not satisfied. Something felt wrong to him, even though he couldn't explain what it was. His instincts were telling him that the situation was dangerous, but his instincts were being controlled by fear and panic rather than real observations. "I don't like this," Johnson said. "Something isn't right. Why does she need a gun anyway? Why was she so quick to tell us about it? Maybe she was planning to use it." Martinez was getting frustrated with his partner. Johnson was creating a problem where none existed. Sarah had done everything right. She had been polite and cooperative. She had informed them about her legal weapon. She had kept her hands visible. She had answered all their questions honestly. "Johnson, she has a legal permit," Martinez said firmly. "She told us about the gun because that's what responsible gun owners do. She's following the law." But Johnson's fear was stronger than his partner's logic. He was convinced that something bad was about to happen. His body was preparing for a fight, even though there was no threat. His muscles were tense. His breathing was shallow. His finger was moving closer to his gun trigger. Sarah noticed that Johnson was getting more agitated instead of calming down. She realized that this situation could get much worse very quickly. She had to do something to try to diffuse the tension before someone got hurt. "Officer Johnson," she said gently, "I can see that you're concerned about everyone's safety. I appreciate that. I want everyone to be safe too. Is there anything I can do to help you feel more comfortable?" This attempt to calm Johnson down had the opposite effect. Her words confirmed his suspicion that she was trying to manipulate the situation. In his panicked mind, only a criminal would try so hard to seem innocent and helpful. Johnson pulled his gun out of its holster and pointed it at Sarah's car. "Get your hands up," he shouted. "Get your hands where I can see them." Sarah's hands were already on the steering wheel where both officers could see them clearly. But Johnson was no longer seeing reality accurately. His fear had created a different version of events in his mind. Martinez was shocked by his partner's actions. "Johnson, put your weapon down. She's not threatening us." But it was too late. The situation had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Johnson's fear had turned a routine traffic stop into a life or death confrontation, and Sarah was about to become the victim of that fear. Sarah stared at the gun pointed at her through the passenger window. Officer Johnson's hands were shaking, and his finger was on the trigger. She had never had a gun pointed at her before. The barrel looked huge and dark. She could not look away from it. Time seemed to move very slowly. Every second felt like an hour. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could hear Johnson breathing heavily. She could hear Martinez shouting something, but the words sounded far away and unclear. "Put your hands up," Johnson yelled again, even though Sarah's hands were already clearly visible on the steering wheel. Sarah did not know what to do. Her hands were already up and visible. She had been cooperative the entire time. She had done everything the officers asked her to do, but Johnson was still pointing his gun at her and shouting commands. "My hands are up, sir," Sarah said as calmly as she could. "They're right here on the steering wheel. You can see them." Martinez was trying to get Johnson's attention. "Partner, put the gun down," he called out. "She's not a threat. Her hands are visible. She's cooperating." But Johnson was no longer hearing his partner clearly. The fear and panic had taken over his mind completely. In his imagination, Sarah was reaching for her gun. In his imagination, she was about to shoot him. In his imagination, he was about to die. None of this was actually happening. Sarah had not moved at all. Her hands had not left the steering wheel. She had not reached for anything. But Johnson's terrified mind was seeing things that were not real. "She's going for her gun," Johnson screamed, even though Sarah had not moved. Martinez looked at Sarah. Her hands were exactly where they had been for the past 10 minutes. She had not moved toward the glove compartment. She had not reached for anything. Johnson was having some kind of breakdown. "Johnson, she hasn't moved," Martinez shouted. "Look at her. Her hands are on the steering wheel." But Johnson could not see reality anymore. His fear had created a different version of events. In his mind, Sarah was dangerous. In his mind, she was about to kill him. In his mind, he had to shoot first or he would die. Sarah realized that Officer Johnson was about to shoot her. She could see it in his eyes. She could see his finger tightening on the trigger. She had maybe 1 or 2 seconds before he pulled it. "Please don't shoot me," Sarah said. "I have children. Please." This was the last thing Johnson heard before his fear took complete control. He squeezed the trigger. The first bullet smashed through the passenger side window. Glass exploded everywhere. The bullet hit the driver's seat headrest, just inches from Sarah's head. If she had been sitting up straighter, it would have killed her instantly. Sarah screamed and instinctively ducked down in her seat. She felt something hot hit her left shoulder. The second bullet had grazed her, tearing through her shirt and cutting into her skin. Blood started flowing immediately. Johnson fired a third shot. This bullet went through the driver's side window and lodged in the door panel. More glass exploded. Sarah was now covered in broken glass and bleeding from her shoulder. Martinez was screaming at his partner to stop shooting, but Johnson could not hear him. The sound of the gunshots had made his hearing temporarily muffled. His vision was focused only on Sarah's car. He was in a state of complete panic. Sarah's mind went into survival mode. Someone was shooting at her. She was wounded. She was probably going to die unless she did something to protect herself. Her nursing training had taught her how people react in life-threatening situations. The body's natural response is to fight, flee, or freeze. She could not flee because she was trapped in her car. Freezing would mean certain death because Johnson might keep shooting. That left only one option: fight back. Sarah's gun was in the lock safe in the glove compartment. Getting to it would mean reaching across the passenger seat while Johnson was shooting at her. It would mean turning her back on the officer with the gun. It would mean moving when any movement might cause him to shoot again. But staying still was not working either. Johnson had already shot her once. He seemed determined to kill her. If she was going to die anyway, she might as well try to defend herself. Sarah made a decision that would change her life forever. She threw herself across the passenger seat toward the glove compartment. Johnson saw this movement and fired again. The bullet hit the dashboard right where her head had been a second earlier. Sarah's hands were shaking as she tried to open the combination lock on the gun safe. She had practiced this combination hundreds of times at the gun range, but she had never tried to do it while someone was shooting at her. Her fingers kept slipping on the numbers. Johnson kept firing. One bullet hit the rearview mirror. Another went through the back window. Sarah was surrounded by gunfire and broken glass. She was bleeding and terrified, but she kept working on the combination lock. Finally, the safe opened. Sarah grabbed her pistol and quickly checked to make sure it was loaded. It was. She had always kept it ready for emergencies, but she had never imagined an emergency like this. Martinez was still shouting at Johnson to stop shooting, but his partner was not listening. Johnson had emptied most of his first magazine and was reaching for a second one. He was planning to keep shooting until Sarah was dead. Sarah knew she had only seconds before Johnson reloaded and started shooting again. She had to make a choice. She could try to hide and hope that Martinez could control his partner, or she could shoot back and try to stop Johnson from killing her. Every instinct in her body told her to defend herself. This was exactly why she had gotten a gun permit in the first place. She had always hoped she would never need to use it, but now, her life depended on it. Sarah rolled down her front windows to get a clear shot. She could see Johnson reloading his weapon. He was standing behind the open door of the police car, using it as cover. Martinez was behind the car, still trying to get Johnson to stop. Sarah aimed her gun at the police car's door where Johnson was hiding. She did not want to kill anyone, but she had to stop him from shooting her again. She squeezed the trigger. Her first shot hit the police car's door with a loud bang. Johnson jumped back, surprised that Sarah was shooting back. He had not expected her to have a gun ready so quickly. In his panicked mind, this confirmed that she had been planning to attack them all along. Sarah fired again. This shot hit the police car's windshield, creating a spider web of cracks. Johnson and Martinez both dove for cover behind the car. The gunfight lasted only about 30 seconds, but it felt like hours to everyone involved. Sarah fired 4 shots total. Johnson had fired 7 shots. Martinez had not fired at all because he was trying to stop his partner instead of joining the fight. When the shooting stopped, everything was quiet except for the sound of car alarms going off in the neighborhood. The gunshots had been loud enough to wake up people several blocks away. Lights were coming on in houses. People were looking out their windows to see what was happening. Sarah was still alive, but she was wounded and bleeding. Her car was destroyed. The windows were shot out. The seats were torn up. There was glass and blood everywhere. Johnson was also still alive, but he was in shock. The reality of what had just happened was starting to sink in. He had shot an innocent woman during a routine traffic stop. She had shot back in self-defense. Now, they were both alive, but everything was different. Martinez was angry and confused. He had tried to prevent this disaster, but he had failed. His partner had created a dangerous situation out of nothing. An innocent woman had been shot. The department would have to answer a lot of difficult questions. Sarah put her gun on the dashboard where the officers could see it clearly. She raised her hands again, even though she was bleeding. She knew that more police officers would arrive soon, and she did not want them to think she was still a threat. "I'm putting my gun down," she called out. "I'm not going to shoot anymore. I was just defending myself." The worst part was over, but the nightmare was just beginning. Sarah's life would never be the same after this night. The consequences of those 30 seconds of gunfire would affect everyone involved for months and years to come. In the distance, Sarah could hear sirens approaching. More police cars were coming. An ambulance was coming. The quiet street where she had been stopped for a broken taillight was about to become a crime scene that would be investigated by dozens of people. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to stop shaking. She was alive, but she was hurt and scared. She did not know if the police would arrest her for shooting at officers. She did not know if Johnson would try to hurt her again. All she knew was that she had done what she had to do to survive. The routine traffic stop was over. The real nightmare was about to begin. The sirens got louder and louder until Sarah could see flashing red and blue lights filling the street. 4 more police cars arrived within 3 minutes. An ambulance pulled up right behind them. A fire truck came next. The quiet residential street now looked like a war zone. Sarah kept her hands raised high where everyone could see them. Her gun was on the dashboard, pointing away from the windows. Blood was running down her arm from the bullet wound in her shoulder, but she was afraid to move to try to stop the bleeding. Any movement might make the new officers think she was still dangerous. Officer Martinez walked toward the arriving police cars with his hands up too. He needed to explain what had happened before the other officers saw Sarah's gun and started shooting again. He knew that the situation could get much worse if someone made the wrong decision in the next few minutes. "This is Officer Martinez," he called out to his fellow officers. "The situation is under control. The woman in the car has been shot. She is not a threat. Her weapon is on the dashboard. She is cooperating." The first officer out of the backup cars was Sergeant Williams, a 20-year veteran who was known for staying calm in difficult situations. He looked at the destroyed police car with bullet holes in the door and windshield. He looked at Sarah's car with all the windows shot out. He immediately understood that something very serious had happened here. "Martinez, what the hell happened?" Sergeant Williams asked. Martinez quickly explained the situation. "We stopped her for a broken taillight. She told us she had a legal firearm in the car." Johnson panicked and started shooting. She shot back. In self-defense, Officer Johnson was sitting on the ground behind the damaged police car. He was staring at nothing and breathing heavily. His hands were still shaking. He looked like he was in shock. Sergeant Williams looked at Johnson with disgust. He had seen young officers panic before, but he had never seen one create a gunfight during a routine traffic stop. This was going to be a nightmare for the entire department. "Johnson, what were you thinking?" Sergeant Williams asked. Johnson could not answer. He was still trying to understand what had happened. In his mind, he had been defending himself against a dangerous criminal. But looking at the scene now, he could see that Sarah was just a regular person who had been trying to cooperate. His fear had turned her into a threat that did not really exist. The paramedics approached Sarah's car carefully. They could see that she was wounded and needed medical attention, but they also knew she had a gun. Even though Martinez had said she was not a threat, they wanted to be careful. "Ma'am, we're paramedics," one of them called out. "We need to check your injuries." Can you step out of the car slowly with your hands visible? Sarah nodded and slowly opened her car door. Broken glass fell to the ground as she moved. She kept her hands raised as she got out of the car. The paramedics could see blood on her shirt and small cuts on her face from the broken glass. I've been shot in the shoulder, Sarah told them. It's not too bad, but it's bleeding a lot. The paramedics quickly examined her wound. The bullet had grazed her shoulder muscle, but had not hit any major blood vessels or bones. She would need stitches and antibiotics, but she was not in immediate danger of dying. While the paramedics worked on Sarah's injuries, Sergeant Williams was trying to figure out what to do next. This situation was complicated in ways that could create problems for months or years. A police officer had shot an innocent woman. The woman had shot back at police officers. Both actions might be legal, but they would need to be investigated carefully. Detective Lisa Thompson arrived 15 minutes after the shooting stopped. She was a specialist in investigating police shootings. Her job was to determine whether the officers had acted properly or if they had committed crimes. Detective Thompson looked at the evidence. She saw the bullet holes in both cars. She saw the broken glass everywhere. She saw Sarah's legal gun on the dashboard of her car. She saw Johnson sitting in shock behind the police car. Has anyone called the district attorney's office? Detective Thompson asked. Not yet, Sergeant Williams replied. I wanted to secure the scene first. Call them now, Thompson said. This is going to be a big case. We need prosecutors here immediately. The district attorney's office sent Assistant District Attorney Michael Rodriguez to the scene. He was an experienced prosecutor who specialized in cases involving police officers. He knew that this case would be closely watched by the media and the community. Rodriguez talked to Martinez first to get the basic facts. Then he talked to the paramedics who were treating Sarah. Finally, he tried to talk to Johnson, but the young officer was still too shaken up to give a clear statement. We need to arrest someone, Rodriguez told Detective Thompson. The question is who? This was the central problem. Johnson had shot Sarah first, but he was a police officer who might have been acting in what he believed was self-defense. Sarah had shot at police officers, but she might have been acting in legal self-defense against an unjustified attack. What does the body camera footage show? Rodriguez asked. Detective Thompson checked Johnson's body camera. The footage clearly showed that Sarah had been cooperative throughout the traffic stop. It showed her keeping her hands visible and informing the officers about her legal firearm. It showed Johnson becoming increasingly agitated for no clear reason. It showed him drawing his gun and shooting first. This is not good for Johnson, Thompson said after watching the footage. She was clearly not a threat. She did everything right. Rodriguez watched the footage too. As a prosecutor, he could see that Johnson's use of force would be very difficult to justify in court. Sarah had not made any threatening moves. She had not reached for her weapon. She had not given Johnson any reason to believe she was dangerous. But the legal situation was still complicated. Even if Johnson had used excessive force, Sarah had still shot at police officers. Some prosecutors might argue that she should have just accepted being shot rather than fighting back. We have to arrest her, Rodriguez said reluctantly. She shot at cops. I don't have a choice. Detective Thompson understood the prosecutor's position, but she did not like it. The evidence clearly showed that Sarah had been the victim of an unjustified police shooting. Arresting her for defending herself seemed wrong. What are the charges going to be? Thompson asked. Attempted murder of a police officer, Rodriguez replied. Maybe aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. We'll let a grand jury decide if the charges are justified. Thompson walked over to where Sarah was being treated by the paramedics. The bullet wound had been cleaned and bandaged. The small cuts from the broken glass had been treated. Sarah was going to be okay physically, but her legal problems were just beginning. Ma'am, I'm Detective Thompson, she said gently. I need to inform you that you're under arrest for attempted murder. Sarah could not believe what she was hearing. She had been shot by a police officer who panicked during a routine traffic stop. She had defended herself with her legal firearm. Now, she was being arrested for attempted murder. I was defending myself, Sarah said. He shot me first. I have a right to protect my own life. I understand, Detective Thompson said, but you shot at police officers. That's a serious crime, even if you were defending yourself. You'll have a chance to explain your side of the story to a lawyer and a judge. The paramedics finished treating Sarah's injuries and helped her into the ambulance. She would be taken to the hospital for additional medical care. After that, she would be taken to jail to be booked on attempted murder charges. As the ambulance drove away, Sergeant Williams talked to the other officers about what would happen next. Johnson would be placed on administrative leave while the shooting was investigated. Martinez would have to write a detailed report about everything he saw. The damaged police car would be examined for evidence. The neighborhood residents who had been awakened by the gunshots were starting to come outside to see what had happened. They saw the bullet-damaged cars and the broken glass in the street. They saw the police officers taking photographs and measuring distances. They knew that something very serious had occurred on their quiet street. Local news reporters started arriving within an hour. They had heard about the shooting on their police scanners. They set up their cameras and began broadcasting live reports about the incident. A routine traffic stop turned into a gunfight tonight, one reporter said into her camera. A woman has been shot and arrested after exchanging gunfire with police officers. The details are still unclear, but this incident is sure to raise questions about police procedures and civilian rights. The story would be on the morning news. It would be in the newspapers. It would be discussed on social media. Sarah's name and face would soon be known by thousands of people who would form opinions about what happened based on incomplete information. Sarah's children would wake up in the morning and find out that their mother was in jail charged with trying to murder police officers. Her co-workers at the hospital would see her name in the news. Her neighbors would talk about the shooting for weeks. Officer Johnson would also see his name in the news, but as the officer who shot an innocent woman during a traffic stop, his career in law enforcement was probably over. He would face an internal affairs investigation and possibly criminal charges. Sarah spent her first night in jail in the medical wing of the county detention center. Her shoulder was bandaged and her arm was in a sling, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional trauma of what had happened. She had never been arrested before. She had never even gotten a speeding ticket. Now, she was facing charges that could send her to prison for the rest of her life. Her children, Marcus and Emma, woke up that morning to find police officers at their door. The officers explained that their mother had been in a shooting and was in jail. The children were confused and scared. They could not understand how their mother, who had always taught them to respect the law, could be accused of trying to murder police officers. Sarah's sister Monica came to take care of the children while Sarah was in jail. Monica had seen the news reports on television, but she did not believe them. She knew Sarah was not violent. She knew Sarah would never hurt anyone unless she had no other choice. The news is saying your mom shot at police officers, Monica told Marcus and Emma. But I know there's more to the story. Your mom is a good person. She would only use her gun to protect herself if someone was trying to hurt her. The local news stations were reporting the story every hour. Most of the early reports made it sound like Sarah had attacked the police officers. The headline said things like "Woman shoots at cops during traffic stop" and "Nurse charged with attempted murder of officers." But as more details came out, the story began to change. A local civil rights organization called The Knock heard about the case and sent a lawyer to meet with Sarah. The lawyer's name was David Kim, and he specialized in cases where police officers used excessive force against civilians. Kim reviewed the police reports and the body camera footage. He could see immediately that Sarah had been the victim, the criminal. The video clearly showed that she had been cooperative and had not threatened the officers in any way. Officer Johnson had shot her first, and she had only returned fire to save her own life. This is a clear case of self-defense, Kim told Sarah during their first meeting in jail. You have the right to defend yourself, even against police officers who are acting illegally. We're going to fight these charges. Kim held a press conference the next day to tell Sarah's side of the story. He showed reporters the body camera footage that proved Sarah had done nothing wrong before Johnson started shooting. He explained that Sarah had a legal permit for her gun and had informed the officers about it, just as the law required. Sarah Williams is not a criminal, Kim said to the cameras. She is a hardworking mother and nurse who was shot by a police officer during a routine traffic stop. She defended herself, as any person has the right to do when their life is in danger. The press conference changed public opinion about the case. People who had initially thought Sarah was a cop killer began to understand that she was actually the victim of police brutality. Social media posts about the case started supporting Sarah instead of condemning her. The national news media picked up the story. CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC all sent reporters to cover the case. Sarah's story became part of the ongoing national conversation about police violence and civilian rights. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse demanding that the charges against Sarah be dropped. Meanwhile, Officer Johnson was dealing with his own problems. The police department had placed him on unpaid administrative leave pending the investigation. His fellow officers were angry with him for creating such a dangerous situation. His family was receiving death threats from people who had seen the news coverage. Johnson met with a police union lawyer who explained that he was likely to face criminal charges for shooting Sarah. The body camera footage made it clear that he had used excessive force against a cooperative civilian. Even if he avoided criminal prosecution, he would almost certainly be fired from the police department. "You panicked," the union lawyer told Johnson bluntly. "There's no way to spin this as justified use of force. The woman did everything right, and you shot her anyway. You're going to face serious consequences." Johnson was devastated. He had become a police officer because he wanted to help people and keep communities safe. Instead, he had hurt an innocent person and destroyed his own career. He began seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma and guilt of what he had done. Officer Martinez, who had witnessed the entire incident, was cooperating fully with the investigation. He gave detailed statements to internal affairs investigators and to the district attorney's office. He made it clear that Sarah had been completely cooperative and that Johnson had created the dangerous situation through his own panic and poor judgment. "She did everything by the book," Martinez told investigators. "She informed us about her legal firearm. She kept her hands visible. She answered all our questions politely. There was no reason for Johnson to draw his weapon, let alone fire it." The investigation took 3 months to complete. During that time, Sarah remained in jail because she could not afford the $500,000 bail that had been set by the judge. Her legal defense fund, organized by civil rights groups, eventually raised enough money to pay for her release, but she had already spent 12 weeks in custody. When Sarah was finally released on bail, she was greeted by dozens of supporters. Outside the jail, many of them were other African American women who had experienced similar treatment by police officers. They held signs that said, "Justice for Sarah," and "Self-defense is not a crime." Sarah's first stop after leaving jail was the hospital where she worked. Her supervisor had saved her job for her, but many of her coworkers were nervous about the controversy surrounding her case. Some supported her completely, while others worried that having an accused cop shooter working at the hospital might create problems. "I just want to get back to my normal life," Sarah told her supervisor. "I want to take care of my patients and my children. I never wanted any of this attention." But Sarah's life would never be completely normal again. She received hundreds of letters from people around the country who supported her case. She also received death threats from people who believed she should have accepted being shot rather than fighting back. She had to change her phone number and be more careful about her personal security. The grand jury that reviewed Sarah's case met for 2 weeks in November. They heard testimony from Officer Martinez, from ballistics experts, and from use of force specialists. They watched the body camera footage multiple times. They reviewed Sarah's gun permit records and her background check. The grand jury's decision was unanimous. They refused to indict Sarah on any charges. The grand jury foreman read a statement saying that Sarah had acted in lawful self-defense against an unjustified attack by Officer Johnson. No reasonable person could expect someone to simply accept being shot without defending themselves, the foreman said. Miss Williams exercised her constitutional right to protect her own life when faced with deadly force from a police officer who was acting outside the law. District Attorney Rodriguez was not surprised by the grand jury's decision, but he was disappointed. He had hoped to avoid setting a precedent that civilians could shoot at police officers, even in self-defense. But the evidence in Sarah's case was too clear to ignore. While we respect the grand jury's decision, Rodriguez said in a statement, we want to emphasize that this case involved very specific circumstances. Citizens cannot simply claim self-defense every time they have a confrontation with police officers. Sarah's legal victory was celebrated by civil rights organizations across the country. Her case became an important precedent establishing that civilians have the right to defend themselves against police officers who use excessive force, even if it means shooting back. But Sarah's legal problems were not completely over. She filed a civil lawsuit against the police department and Officer Johnson, seeking compensation for her medical bills, lost wages, and emotional trauma. The city eventually agreed to settle the lawsuit for $2.8 million rather than face a lengthy trial. Officer Johnson was fired from the police department and charged with aggravated assault for shooting Sarah. He eventually pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. His police career was over, and he would never be allowed to work in law enforcement again. The police department used Sarah's case as an example in new training programs about de-escalation and proper use of force. Officers were taught to recognize the signs of panic and fear that had led Johnson to make such a terrible mistake. The department also changed its policies about how officers should handle traffic stops involving legally armed civilians. Sarah used some of her settlement money to start a nonprofit organization that provides legal assistance to people who have been victims of police violence. She also became a public speaker, telling her story at conferences and community meetings around the country. I never wanted to be famous, Sarah said in one of her speeches. I just wanted to go home to my children after work. But if my experience can help other people understand their rights and prevent similar tragedies, then maybe something good can come from this nightmare. Marcus and Emma had to deal with the fame and controversy surrounding their mother's case. Some of their classmates, parents did not want their children associating with the kids of a woman who had shot at police officers.